I found this horror story on Reddit, but it seems strangely real, and so I need to share it with you. But first, if you're new here, remember to subscribe to the channel. The channel's goal is to get 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I think we can achieve it. So please sign up. Now let's move on to the first story. I renovated an abandoned hospital. Our first guest wasn't human. I should never have listened to Jack. It will be an adventure, he said. We'll make it beautiful, he promised. Now I'm trapped in this nightmare, and I don't know if I'll ever escape. But I need to write this to warn others. Please, no matter what you do, stay away from the old Willowbrook Hotel. It all started 6 months ago. Jack and I had been married for a little over a year and were looking for a project to tackle together, something that challenged us but also brought us closer. That's when we came across the listing for the abandoned Willowbrook Psychiatric Hospital. The realtor's photos showed a huge Victorian-style building, all faded red brick and crumbling white trim. Vines climbed the walls, nature slowly taking back what man had left behind. It was exactly the kind of renovation Jack had always dreamed of. "Can you imagine, Liv?" he said, blue eyes shining with. "We could turn it into a boutique hotel, something really unique." I was hesitant at first. The place gave me goosebumps, even in photos, but Jack's enthusiasm was infectious, and I soon found myself drawn into his vision. We could restore the grand staircase, update the rooms with modern amenities while maintaining the vintage charm, maybe even add a spooky story twist for Halloween. So, we took a chance. We emptied our savings account, took out a huge loan, and became the proud and terrified owners of a dilapidated former psychiatric ward. The first few months were a whirlwind of demolition and reconstruction. We lived in a small trailer parked outside, spending every waking hour working at the hotel. It was exhausting but exhilarating. Jack and I were a great team, and I began to believe that we could actually pull off this crazy scheme. But then the dreams began. It started with vague feelings of discomfort. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing without being able to remember why. Then the nightmares became more vivid. Shadowy figures lurk in corners, screams echoing through long, dark corridors, and always, the feeling of being watched. I tried to get rid of it. Stress and lack of sleep, I told myself. It didn't help that we kept finding strange things as we worked. A drawing hidden behind a baseboard showing stick figures with empty eyes. Scratch marks on the inside of a cabinet door. One time I could have sworn I heard a buzzing sound coming from an empty room. Jack ignored my concerns. "It's an old building, honey," he would say. "Sure, it has some quirks, but think about how amazing it's going to be when we're done." I wanted to believe him, I really wanted to. But as the weeks passed, the feeling of error only grew stronger. The day we finished the last guest room, I found Jack in the lobby, smiling from ear to ear. "We did it, Liv," he exclaimed, pulling me into a bear hug. "We're ready to open." I forced a smile, trying to ignore the shiver that ran down my spine. "Are you sure we're ready?" I asked. "Maybe we should wait a bit. Do some testing with friends or family first." Jack shook his head. "No way, we have bills to pay. Plus, I've already booked our first guest. He's arriving tomorrow." My stomach dropped. "Tomorrow? Jack, it's too early. We don't even..." He met with a kiss. "It's going to be okay, sweetie. Trust me." I wish I hadn't done that. The next evening, just as the sun was setting, a sleek black car pulled into the long, winding driveway. Jack and I were on the front steps, trying to look welcoming despite my nervousness. A tall man in an expensive-looking suit got out of the car. He had silver hair and piercing gray eyes that seemed to look right through me. "Welcome to the old Willowbrook Hotel," Jack said, extending his hand. "I'm Jack, and this is my wife, Olivia." The man's thin lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Delighted," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "You can call me Mr. Smith." As I shook his hand, a shock of something passed between us. His skin was icy cold, and for a split second I could have sworn his eyes glowed completely black. "Is everything okay, Mrs.?" asked Mr. Smith, tilting his head. I blinked, and his eyes were normal again, just gray. "Nothing unusual. I must have imagined it." "Sorry," I muttered. "It's been a long day. Let me show you to your room." As we walked through the lobby, Mr. Smith's eyes darted around, taking in every detail. "Fascinating place," he murmured. "So much history in these walls." I led him up the grand staircase, aware of his presence behind me. We put him in room 217 at the end of the hall. As I fumbled with the key, I noticed his gaze fixed on a spot just above the doorframe. "Is there a problem?" I asked. He smiled that cold smile again. "No way. I was just admiring your protection." I frowned, following his gaze. There was nothing there but peeling paint. Before I could ask what he meant, Jack appeared, carrying Mr. Smith's suitcase. "Here you go, sir. Liv, why don't you go downstairs and start preparing dinner? I'll finish getting Mr. Smith settled." I nodded, grateful for the excuse to escape. As I ran down the stairs, I heard Mr. Smith's voice coming from behind me. "I think I'm going to really enjoy my stay here." A shiver ran through me. What had we gotten ourselves into? That night, I tossed and turned, unable to shake the feeling of dread that settled over me. Every creak from the old building left my nerves on edge. Just as I was finally falling asleep, a bone-chilling scream woke me up. I stood up quickly, my heart pounding. "Jack, did you hear that?" My husband stirred beside me, rubbing his eyes. "Hear what, sweetie?" "That scream. Someone was..." Another scream pierced the air, closer this time. Jack sat up, suddenly alert. "What the hell?" We dragged ourselves out of bed, throwing on robes as we ran into the hallway. The scream came from the direction of room 217, Mr. Smith's room. Jack got to the door first, knocking on it. "Mr. Smith, are you okay?" No response, and I tried the handle, locked. "I'll open it," said Jack, fiddling with the master key. Part of me wanted to tell him to stop, to just call the police and let them deal with it. But I knew we couldn't do that. Not when our first and only guest could be in trouble. The lock clicked and Jack pushed the door open. The room was dark, lit only by the moonlight that filtered through the curtains. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The bed was immaculate, looking like no one had slept on it. "Mr. Smith?" I called softly. A low laugh came from the corner of the room. We both turned to see Mr. Smith sitting in an armchair, perfectly composed in his suit despite the late hour. "Everything is fine?" Jack asked. "We heard screams." Mr. Smith's lips curved into that unsettling smile. "You did? How strange. I've been sitting here peacefully all night." I frowned. "But we both heard..." "Perhaps," interrupted Mr. Smith, "it was simply the wind. Those old buildings, fascinating noises, don't they?" Something about his tone made my skin crawl. I pulled Jack's arm. "We're sorry to have bothered you, Mr. Smith. Have a good night." As we turned to leave, Mr. Smith spoke again. "Oh, Mrs. Campbell, you might want to check room 113. I believe there might be a problem there." I froze. We hadn't told him our last name, and room 113 was still under renovation. We hadn't even mentioned its existence to him. Back in our room, I turned to Jack. "That was weird, okay? Tell me it wasn't just me." He ran his hand through his hair. "Yeah, it was weird. But maybe he heard our name somewhere, and he might have seen the room numbers when we showed him around." I shook my head. "Jack, something isn't right here. We need to..." A loud thump from below interrupted me. "It came from the direction of room 113, Jack said, his face pale. We walked down the stairs, the old wood creaking beneath our feet. The closer we got to room 113, the colder the air became. When we reached the door, I could see my breath fog up in front of me. Jack reached for the doorknob, but I grabbed his wrist. "Wait," I whispered. "Listen." From behind the door came a soft sound. How? Cry? No, I didn't cry. Whimpering. The sound of someone in pain. "Hello?" Jack called. "Is anyone there?" The whining stopped abruptly. For a moment there was only silence. Then a voice, loud and spoke. "Help me! She won't let me leave!" Jack and I exchanged horrified looks. There shouldn't have been anyone in that room, much less a... "We're going in," Jack said, turning the handle. The door creaked open, revealing nothing. The room was empty, dusty furniture covered with tarps. No sign of a or any other person. "What the fuck is going on?" Jack muttered. I was about to respond when something caught my attention. On the far wall, illuminated by a ray of moonlight, there were a series of scratch marks. As I got closer, I realized they were forming words. "Don't let him stay." My froze. "Jack," I whispered, "we need to get out of here, now." He nodded, his face pale. Yeah, okay, let's get some clothes," and a scream from upstairs interrupted him, but this time it wasn't the unearthly scream from before. Era O. Senior Smith. We ran back upstairs, all thoughts of leaving forgotten. The door to room 217 was wide open now, and the sounds coming from inside made my stomach turn. Wet, tearing noises, as if something was being torn apart. "Mr. Smith," Jack called as we approached the door. The noises stopped. We looked into the room, and I had to cover my mouth with my hand to stifle a scream. Mr. Smith was in the center of the room, his back to us, but he was no longer Mr. Smith. His suit was in tatters, revealing gray, mottled skin beneath, and his head... oh God, his head was twisted completely back. Gray eyes staring at us over his shoulder. He smiled, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "I'm so glad you could join us," said the thing that used to be Mr. Smith. "The others have been waiting so long." As if on cue, the shadows began to slip away from the walls. Dozens of them, vaguely human in shape, with glowing eyes and eager hands. "You see," continued Mr. Smith, his head slowly turning to face forward again with a series of sickening cracks, "when you opened this place, you let us in again. And now, we will never let you out." The shadows advanced. Jack grabbed my hand, pulling me back into the hallway. "Run!" he shouted. We fled down the hall, the sound of inhuman laughter echoing behind us. But when we reached the top of the stairs, I realized with horror that more shadows were rising from the lobby. Our escape. We were trapped. Jack and I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, shadows closing in on either side. The thing that used to be Mr. Smith approached slowly, tasting our fear. "What do you want?" managed to say in a loud voice. He tilted his head, an unsettling imitation of curiosity. "Want? My dear, we simply want what we were promised, what was stolen from us so long ago." Jack's grip on my hand tightened. "We don't understand," he said, his voice shaking. "We just bought this place to fix it up. We didn't steal anything." The creature laughed, a sound like bones crunching together. "Oh, but you did. You stole our home, our hunting grounds." As he spoke, the shadows approached. I could feel his cold touch on my skin, hear his whispers in my ears. Fragments of memories that weren't mine flashed through my mind. Straitjackets, padded cells, screams echoing down endless corridors. This was never just a hospital, I realized out loud. It was a prison. For them, not Mr. Smith's smile grew impossibly wider. "Very well. See, the doctors here, they knew what we were, what we could do. They tried to contain us, study us, but we were too strong, too hungry." Jack shook his head. "That's impossible. Willowbrook closed over 50 years ago. You can't be—" "Time means nothing to us," the creature growled. "We waited, we grew stronger, and now, thanks to you two, we are free again." The shadows advanced, and I knew we only had seconds left. In desperation, I grabbed the nearest object, a heavy brass lamp from a side table, and threw it at not Mr. Smith's head. To my shock, it hit with a sickening crunch. The creature howled, more in anger than pain, and the shadows retreated momentarily. "The attic!" I shouted at Jack. "There's another staircase in the old servants' quarters." We dashed down the hallway, the sounds of pursuit close behind. I took Jack to a hidden door I had discovered during renovations, praying it would still open. And so it was, revealing a narrow staircase. We ran upstairs, slamming the door behind us. Jack wedged a broken chair under the doorknob, but we both knew it wouldn't last long. The attic was a maze of old furniture and forgotten relics. Dust swirled in the air, making it difficult to breathe. We navigated the place through a single circular window. "There," Jack pointed to a hatch in the ceiling. "It should lead to the roof." When he reached out to take it, a cold hand wrapped around my ankle. I screamed, the shadow that had somehow slipped through the floorboards. Jack spun around, picking up a rusty fire poker. He swung it through the shadow, which dissipated with an unearthly scream. More shadows crept in now. The door at the bottom of the stairs shattered with a thunderous crash. "Go!" I shouted to Jack. "Open the hatch!" He hesitated for a split second, then nodded. While he struggled with the rusty lock, I defended myself from the encroaching darkness with savage blows from the fire poker. Finally, the hatch creaked open. Jack stood up and then reached back to help me. As soon as my fingers brushed his, something wrapped around my waist, pulling me back. I screamed, clawing at the attic floor. Not Mr. Smith's distorted face loomed over me, jaws unhinged to reveal that mouth full of sharp teeth. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed. Jack lunged forward, grabbing my arms. For a moment I was suspended between two forces, Jack pulling me to safety and the creature dragging me back into the darkness. "Let go of her!" Jack shouted, straining. The creature's only response was a bone-chilling laugh. I could feel my grip on Jack's hands slipping. The shadows were crawling up my body, their touch burning like ice. In that moment I knew with a terrifying certainty that if I let go, I would be lost forever. "Jack," I said breathlessly, "no matter what happens, don't let go of me. Please." His eyes met mine, full of determination and fear. "Never," he promised. The shadows advanced, enveloping both of us. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe. All I knew was the feel of Jack's hands in mine as we were pulled in opposite directions. Something had to give, and then, with a deafening roar that shook the entire building, it happened. The roar grew louder, drowning out even the inhuman screams from the shadows. Suddenly I felt a rush of cold air. Jack gave one last desperate tug, and I flew up out of the greedy darkness and onto the roof. We backed away from the open hatch, panting. Below us, the creature that was once Mr. Smith howled in fury. But something else was happening. The entire building began to shake violently. Cracks spiderwebbed the roof beneath our feet, and a deep groaning sound comes from within the walls. "The foundation," Jack shouted over the noise. "When we renovated it, we must have weakened it somehow." I watched in horrified amazement as the grand old building began to collapse in on itself. The shadows writhed and writhed, trying to escape, but they seemed trapped in the structure. Their screams mingled with the sounds of breaking glass and splintered wood. Jack pulled me to the edge of the roof. "We have to jump." I looked at the ground dizzily far below. "We'll never survive that fall. We have no choice." He was right. The ceiling was collapsing beneath us. It was either jump or be dragged down with the hotel and its monstrous inhabitants. Hand in hand, we jumped. I would like to say that I remembered some profound thought as we fell, or that my life flashed before my eyes. But honestly, all I remember is screaming. We hit something softer than the ground, the awning over the front entrance, I realized later. This slows our fall enough. We stayed and fell hard into the gravel entrance. Everything hurt, but we were alive. We shuffled away from the ruined building, turning to watch the old Willowbrook Hotel, our dream, our nightmare, behind a cloud of dust and otherworldly wails. As the dust settled, an eerie silence fell. No more screaming, no more shadows, just the faint wail of sirens in the distance. Jack pulled me close, his body shaking with sobs of relief. I clung to him, barely daring to believe we had survived. That was 3 months ago. The official story is that we accidentally triggered a sinkhole during renovations. There were lots of questions, of course, about Mr. Smith, whose rental car was found abandoned miles away, about why we were on the roof, about the screams the neighbors reported hearing. But in the end, there was no evidence of anything supernatural. Just two lucky idiots who almost died when his poorly planned renovation went horribly wrong. Jack and I don't talk about what really happened that night. Not to the police, not to our families, not even to each other. It's easier to pretend it was all a stress-induced hallucination, that we imagine the shadows, the creature, the centuries-old evil that we accidentally released. But I know the truth. I see it in the way Jack shrinks from unexpected shadows. I feel it in the nightmares that wake me up, my heart racing. Sure, I can hear whispers in the walls. We've since moved to a bright, modern apartment with no history and no dark corners for monsters to hide. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I'm back in that hotel. I feel the shadows crawling over my skin. I hear that bone-chilling laugh, and I wonder, did we really escape? Or did we just bring a piece of that darkness home with us? I am writing this now as a warning for anyone considering purchasing an older building with a dark past, for urban explorers seeking thrills in abandoned places, for anyone who thinks evil is just a concept, not a tangible force. Take care, be cautious, because sometimes monsters are real, and once you've seen them, you can never really see them again. As for Jack and me, we are done with the renovation projects. These days, we're just focusing on rebuilding our lives one day at a time, and hoping that the shadows we glimpse in the corners of our eyes are just that, shadows and nothing more. But deep down, I know better, and I sleep with the lights on, just in case. Everyone's mother is behind us. If I tell you, they will come back. They already found me and took me away. Now all I have left is what's in my head to try to convince the world of the horror I saw. I hope it's enough for you to believe me, but appropriately vague for me to stay alive. If I could keep quiet about it, I would. But I can't, so I don't bother with that either. Okay, here goes. The video came from a local thrift store. I never buy VHS and DVDs. I was looking for jeans. But the faded duct tape and even seedier movie title called to me from my teenage days when my dad used to record movies on cable TV. We watched them over and over again, none more so than Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Even with its clunky edits, I never saw the shaman guy rip that guy's heart out. We loved it. So I picked up the tape because someone had written Doom on it with a big, thick marker, like my dad used to do. I figured the Temple of Part had simply worn out. I couldn't be more wrong. After digging up my parents' VCR, which I had inherited, I watched the first episode of Everyone's Mom. In Russian, it is called Mama Kazdogo, but the program is not Russian, at least I don't think it is. The dialogue spoken by the actors, I think that's what they were or thought they were, is in something else. I couldn't figure out what. So episode 1, all based on what I remember. VCR tracking cleans up beat tape decently. A white streak rains steadily across the scene, a kitchen set up like any Western sitcom. A middle-aged woman in an apron puts on oven mitts and winks at the camera before a man and 2 girls rush in with the same complaint. They're asking, "What's for dinner?" Or maybe, "When will it be ready?" These people are the woman's TV family. She is everyone's mother, but I still don't understand how. She's attractive, but she doesn't wear much. There is firmness beneath her red blouse and apron. An athlete once, perhaps. Some kind of warning is released from his thin lips. The girls are in a bad mood. The strict husband, too. That's the joke. Or so I think. The rest of the episode unfolds, and it appears to be about the husband saying something at work. Something that is not well received by his co-workers at an auto repair shop. His boss talks to him, but the husband is secretly defiant. After a stern but not cruel lecture from her boss, the husband scoffs and lights a cigarette. As he leaves the store, he hesitates and looks back. Real terror takes over his expression. The scene abruptly back to the kitchen. The mother of all receives her humble husband. Their conversation seems serious. She places a strange box on the kitchen table. It is completely dark, not painted black, but like the empty depths of space, devoid of stars. He looks into the abyss of the box's surface, his skin visibly paled. If it's acting, then the husband is the best in the world. His TV wife says something with apparent gravity. He steps back when she leaves and turns off the light. The man is left in the kitchen with the box, darker than darkness. Finally, he sighs and takes her with him. One quart gross makes me think of a commercial break and the way my dad would sit by the VCR, carefully the ads with your finger on the record button. When the static subsides, the kitchen is lit by a manufactured sunrise. Everyone's mother turns from the sink with a breakfast tray. She almost bows as she places it on the table. Your husband staggers slowly, tired, uncomfortable. Her dialogue is one question. He reveals the box, carefully hidden at his side, away from the public. With as much care as he can manage, his hands shake. He places the cursed object next to the tray. Everyone's mother continues to prepare breakfast. I think she asks if he's hungry. He chokes and passes out on the floor, but not before his head hits the seat of a chair. To dinner, for a close-up of everyone's mother's face. She shakes her head and smiles, saying something, a joke without a doubt, according to the soundtrack. Your image freezes and the credits roll. End of episode 1. Strange, quirky, and slightly disturbing. I figured it was just cultural differences and the obvious language barrier. Totally understandable. I took the tape and played video games. The tape sat on top of the VCR for the better part of a month. I didn't think about it until I saw her at the outlet mall. She left a furniture store while I was waiting in line for a hot dog from a food truck. It couldn't be her. That's what I thought. I continued waiting, but then she answered her cell phone and smiled. Even behind thick sunglasses, those big teeth and wire lips were a remarkable coincidence. Too remarkable. I got out of line. I knew I was right when I got close enough to hear her speaking that language, whatever it was. The call ended and she stopped to smoke a vape. That's when she saw me watching. His eyebrows rose. Yes? She asked, without an accent. Is there a problem? Her show looked like it came out of the 80s at most. However, she looked strong and almost young, perhaps even younger. She would certainly my in this. Sorry, I don't want to stare. Are you from a TV show? Were you on a TV show called Everyone's Mom? I don't know what the hell you're talking about, she shouted, in a way that said she knew exactly what the hell I was talking about. Look, I said, I'm not trying to upset you. I found an old tape of your show. Kind of a crazy coincidence to see you at Bridal Veil Lake. The show doesn't feel Canadian. Where was it filmed? She took off her sunglasses, put them in her bag, and then dropped said bag. Without preamble, she ran down the hallway of the outdoor mall where we were, near an Old Navy, and punched me in the face. I fell back and tasted before hitting the ground. What the hell, lady? Are you crazy or something? She came to me again and squeezed her fist inside my t-shirt, twisting the material until I couldn't breathe. She scolded me in her language and gave me another spanking. Security guards showed up but did nothing but watch. However, their presence was enough for her to let me go. She spat at me and went straight to the nearest guard. Aggression, she said, pointing back at me as she walked away. I hadn't started breathing normally again to deny it. The guards took this silence as confirmation. They moved and grabbed my arms, pulling me up, lifting me up. I shrugged them off and just ran. I'm a good runner when the direction is away from trouble and psycho bitches. I didn't know what to do next. Keeping quiet, working from home, avoiding the mall seemed like prudent choices. It didn't take long to give in to the urge to watch more of the tape. Episode 2. Once again, she winks at the camera. His casual joy falters when his daughters enter, arguing about something to do with their faces. I imagine, but I'm wrong. The matter is resolved by the father's input. Everyone rushes to his comfort, pulling out his chair, bringing coffee, and opening a newspaper. They flatter him. It's a classic extortion attempt by a TV family. Or it would be if the man didn't look so grim. He barely has the energy to pick up his cup and drools when he finally coordinates the sips. The TV dad mumbles something and is watched closely as he leaves for work. The girls start fighting again. After an establishing shot of the school, they enter a hallway full of lockers, still arguing. They keep pointing at each other's faces and their own. Some boys come in and talk, but the girls completely ignore them. Everyone goes to class where another exhausted-looking man, a teacher, sits at a desk. An extended lecture begins. The sisters look enchanted and deeply affected. At the end, they look at each other and point to their own faces. They laugh and hug, having reached the end of the argument. Everyone's mother scrubs the floor. The girls run excitedly and slide. A cheesy fast-forward effect is used to zoom them across the screen at speed and cartoon sound effect. Whoosh! Mom shakes her head at the mud stain on the freshly cleaned floor. She throws the mop on the floor and goes to her daughters in the living room. The girls are upside down on the couch. A laugh suggests humor. Incomprehensible dialogue is exchanged, but it ends with the girls tapping a finger on their cheek as if they want a kiss from their mother. Instead, she brings the box of In This Scary from the previous episode. The sisters nod and interlock their fingers. They carry the box together, upstairs, presumably to their bedroom. I drop my beer when they scream. It's so loud that I'm confused about the source. It's a bit like when ads often turn up the volume to shock viewers. It works. I'm nervous as hell, but I have no idea what's being sold. Everyone's mother rolls her eyes, says a catchphrase, I think, and goes upstairs. Laughter and clapping erupt as she freezes and the credits roll. There is no intro for the next episode. The screen bursts with snow and it clears on the girls' disfigured faces. But only for a second or two. It switches back to his hands unfolding. Inside is an eyeball. Your eyeballs. They smile at each other. They smile. They laugh. They smile. Each sister is missing an eye. They check the box. They're about to touch it, open it. End of episode 2. The tape stopped and ejected itself. I didn't move for a while. Damn, I couldn't stop my fingers from squeezing the arms of the recliner. What the fuck had I seen? It felt real. Maybe it was the show? As if maybe to mess with viewers' expectations about the genre? Some kind of work of art? Of course, that could be it. I couldn't convince myself. It felt real. Really. But what did I know about gouged out eyeballs? These girls wouldn't be smiling about this. Therefore, he concludes, it must be false. But I still hadn't moved. And I didn't do that. Not until the tape put itself back in the VCR and started playing again. Christ, no! I jumped up and turned everything off. I didn't want to see anything else. I'd stayed inside too long, I decided. Nothing came of the outlet mall incident. The security guards probably watched the footage and saw how she attacked me without any visible provocation. There's no point in calling the police about this. I would probably have a good case for assault, but I would probably be villainized. No one would believe that I hadn't said something dirty or to her first. In the late afternoon, I went to the thrift store where I bought the tape. There are many such places around the Bridal Veil Lake tourist area. They are basically pawn shops with no hope of redemption. Shopkeepers pay poorly for items and never return them. Desperate tourists return to the casino to continue gambling or pay off another predatory lender. This one was called Stefan. I entered. Heat and humidity mixed with mothballs and dust stick to the inside of my nostrils. The noisy fans above the teenage cashier provided slight relief. I bought a tape here, he told the girl. She didn't look away from the phone. Uh-huh. A VHS tape. It was a weird show from, I don't know, like Russia, but not Russia. It was not labeled. I thought it was Temple of Doom. We don't buy old VHS tapes, she said, again without looking at me, but I bought it here. We do not sell old, unlabeled VHS tapes. Like, what would the price be again? I think I paid $2. I pointed at that, she sighed. Do you have the receipt? I didn't remember receiving one. No, So how can I help you, sir? There were no other customers in the dimly lit aisles of old appliances and broken toys. I've never found a decent pair of jeans here. I doubted the legitimacy of Stefan's. Someone took my money for that tape, I said. Do you want your money back? No, it's the tape, and what's on it is... Look, is there a manager here? Stefan! The girl practically screamed in my face. This guy wants to talk to you about a tape or something. A what? The question came from some back room, surprisingly close, but where exactly I never found out. A ribbon. Finally, I heard footsteps and shuffling, and none other than the TV dad from the show came out. He looked grayer and a little wrinkled, but nowhere near the age I would expect. The same lackluster energy his stern expression and slumped posture. Despite the heat, he wore a cardigan. How can I help you? He asked in perfect accent-free English. Taking a break, the girl said before I could respond. She pushed open the front door and lit a cigarette without breaking eye contact with her phone. I bought a tape a while ago, and I still had swelling and bruises from my first encounter with a cast member from Everyone's Mom. There's a show, and I was wondering if you could tell me about it. His faded blue eyes stared at me. Everyone's mother, he admitted. Yes, but how did you do it? I bought it from your store, sir, I said. Oh, how strange. It must have ended up on the shelf by mistake. He extended his hand. I don't have it with me, I said. Oh. He retracts his hand and looks sad until a sudden thought seemed to give him some energy. You could bring him. You have it at home, yes? I do, but Stefan started to get excited. He took my hand and squeezed gently. Yes, bring it back here. I don't know how it ended up on the shelf. It should never have been on the shelf. And who sold it? This is a marvel. We do not sell unbranded tapes. So you're going to bring her back. And his verbal torrent stopped when he saw the empty space where his employee was smoking. She had sold it to me. I remembered now. Thinking she had been found out, she left before Stefan could fire her, or worse. She did it. She sold the tape to you and kept the money. Look, it was only $2. I bring it back. He shook his fist at the empty space. She knows we don't sell off-brand VHS tapes. That's probably why she did it, I said, completely forgetting the purpose of going into the store. She thought you wouldn't lose the tape, and, well, I guess you didn't before I told you. I'll go get her, Stefan said calmly, almost to himself. I didn't understand, but this was nothing new. I'll get it now, don't worry. As soon as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I realized my complete failure to find out anything else about the show. I didn't even mention the fact that Stefan's TV wife had beaten me. Surely this had to be relevant information to him. Whatever. I would take the disgusting art tape, give it back to him, and be done with this whole ordeal forever. Before I reached the corner, Stefan stuck his head out the door and shouted, "Don't look at that!" I smiled shyly. Sorry, I've already watched some. I thought it was Temple of Doom. Oh. He seemed to think about it. Don't watch anymore. Don't watch the end. Don't watch, no. His voice trailed off as he walked back inside his shop. I walked home quickly, fully intending to give the tape to this man without watching anymore, but it was already playing when I walked in and I couldn't look away from the horror. Episode? The sisters don't have eyes. Their noses have been removed. They smile widely, so it's clear that several of their teeth are also gone. Both girls at this point in the series appear to have entered adulthood, so I know this isn't episode 3 or even season 3 of the show. It's definitely the same girls, the ones who happily glanced at the mystery box on the kitchen table. Stefan with the right hand because the left is missing. He must have caught a fake one between then and our meeting. I just never noticed. Everyone's mother is leading a family meeting. The subject matter is dark and directed at Stefan. She pulls the ends of her hair, which is gray. There are prominent wrinkles around the eyes, more than I saw at the outlet. She pats his forearms and asks him something sweetly. He reluctantly agrees and starts crying while rolling up his sleeve. The girls clap their identical stumps. Their TV mom takes one butcher and takes her to Stefan. I turn around before I can see the pain erupts from his lips, and I know it's not acting. It's real. It's real. What the fuck is going on? When he starts to whimper, I finally look back and find him holding a piece of his own skin. He grits his teeth and opens the box. I can't see what's inside, but whatever's in there pulls the piece of until Stefan can close the lid again. Everyone's mother is happy. The girls are happy. Stefan is covered in sweat and vomits on the floor. That's when your TV wife looks into the camera and delivers the catchphrase before the show concludes. There is applause, of course, and the freeze frame fades into the credits in this later season. I watch them without hope of decoding it. But then, at the end, there is a drawing. End of the episode? I couldn't find anything to write with or about. What I remember is a bull-headed monster with his hands over the fire. That's enough for Google. He led me to a name. What I read was scary, but I didn't have time to delve deeper because that's when they opened my door. It was locked. I never leave it unlocked. It was locked. It's not fair. Everyone's mother and father entered, followed by a team. A dozen or more people silently entered the apartment, carrying boxes and tools. I sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and tried to imagine. She took the tape and hit me with it. Who gave you this? I bought it, I said, but very quietly. I don't think she heard. Kill him, she said. I didn't have time to scream. Everyone grabbed my arms and legs and pinned me to the ground. She watched as they prepared their saws for my dismemberment and disposal. Please, no, stop! I looked for Stefan and found him near the door, leaning against one of the boxes. The chainsaw was about to cut my neck. Molek, please! Molek Lek! Moleki! That's the name of the bull-headed monster, according to Google. The name made the crew shudder and hesitate. "Brat, kid!" His quick knocked out a molar, which spat on my face. "Stop saying that," she said. "Molek," I said louder. "Please." I have no idea what the name meant or why it should make her even angrier, but I certainly wasn't going to keep quiet to make my process easier. Stefan shouted something finally in the language they used on the tape. She shouted back, and they argued for a bit before he came and knelt down next to me. "Do you want the box?" I knew which box he was referring to, and I certainly didn't want it, but the alternative, painful. It wasn't a choice either, or so I thought. I should have chosen. Then I would never have seen her or the last daughter. Then I would be free. Unfortunately, I nodded. Stefan argued a little more with everyone's mother, but she quickly gave in. He grabbed my shoulder. He smiled, genuinely happy at the moment. The show was made for that, so that we could show others the way. I didn't think it would work. You are the first to choose God over death. How lucky for me. "Bring the box, Mom," Stefan says to who he thinks is his wife. A hair's breadth from left me stunned. I asked, as if it mattered, "Isn't she your wife?" Stefan smiled and smiled. "She is my mother." He gestured to the crew. "She is everyone's mother." He laughed. "You will understand soon." I didn't see where it came from, but there was the midnight box on the floor next to me. She knelt down and seemed less angry. Forgive me, I had begun to lose hope that there would ever be another. "Everything is fine." "Shh, not you," she snapped. "You are nothing yet, not until you give something you can never get back." To my continued astonishment, she unbuttoned her blouse, revealing patches of scar tissue beneath her prosthetic breasts. Her real breasts were gone, and then I knew why. I opened the box and looked inside. Somehow, the darkness inside her is even darker than the outside. It seemed alive, although nothing could be seen. She watched me. She waited. "What should I give?" I asked her. "What does he want?" The rest of the team took out their cell phones and started recording. "God wants everything," she said, "but you're not ready. We all start small." She pulled the tooth out of my shirt and held it between me and the empty box. "Molek?" I asked. I don't know why, it was just a tooth. I could live without it. Still, I hesitated. Something other than fear of pain and warned me against giving him anything. A primitive wariness of something known in human DNA but consciously forgotten. "This is the enemy. This is God," she said. "Put it on. You will know." I picked up my molar and reached for the box. She grabbed my wrist hard and fast. "Drop it, you idiot. God takes what is given, accidentally or not. Do you want to give your whole hand, your arm?" I don't know why I looked at Stefan at that moment. I looked. He touched the prosthetic hand with his remaining hand. Our eyes met. He tried to smile encouragingly, but it quickly faltered, and he went back to staring into space. She let go. I dropped the tooth. He disappeared into the box without making a sound. There would be the gentle impact of an object hitting the inner bottom of any ordinary box. I think I wish I had heard such a sound. Maybe then I could convince myself that this was all somehow a trick. It wasn't. It is not. One of the boxes brought by the crew shook slightly. Then a bell started tinkling inside. Everyone's mother stood up and clapped once. "Open!" she ordered. Stefan looks more uncertain. "We must. It's already a lot for him," and his mother slapped him without hesitation. Crew members unlock and open the box lid. They slowly tilted her, presenting the latter of the two daughters to me. The sight threw me to the ground. So little was left. None of his facial features, teeth, hair, ears remain. All four members are gone. Scars from repeatedly ripped out ruined the entirety of it, every inch. They suspended her by her torso in the box with heavy ropes. I don't even know how I knew it was her. "God, no," I said. "This couldn't be real. How could you? How could you?" I started accusing them all. "You don't understand," Stefan said. "She gave everything she had for her mother." "For us," she corrected tartly. Stefan deflated. "And now she will give it again. To you, initiate. To hasten your understanding of God." Before I could react, she pulled out a make and tore off a piece of skin from her daughter's shoulder. The torso writhed in the ropes, that empty mouth stretched and offered a muffled scream. Tears flowed from the hollow sockets of his eyes. I started vomiting on the floor. The mother fed the box with meat. Stefan brought me a wet cloth while the team, somewhat mundanely, packed everything up, including the last daughter. Mom took the box. They left my apartment without saying goodbye. Stefan said, "You'll understand in the morning." He tried to smile again, but couldn't be genuine. He followed the rest to the exit of the stairs. I sat in my chair for a while. I grabbed a beer from the fridge. It's like I wanted to freak out, but too much had happened. I was overwhelmed. Hollow would be an accurate description. The part that could feel didn't work anymore. "I should call the police," I said to the empty apartment. That's when I noticed the tape was gone. Mom and her cult had taken her with them. Stefan's store is also gone. I went the next day. They even scrubbed the sign until there was nothing left. But did I know that in the morning? Yes, more or less. I am 43 years old. I had the gray hair and sagging muscle tone to prove it. I fell asleep in my chair that night. When I woke up, I felt the difference immediately. No lower back pain, no hip strain. And I could have done somersaults like a in the bathroom, and then I saw why. I'm a 43-year-old man. Now I look like I'm in my early teens. On the plus side, I finally managed to freak out, which I did, alternating between screams of insanity and cautious joy. On the extreme negative side, I can only work from home and interact with precisely no one. No one would believe who I really am. People who look like me are literally... I have no community except one, and like I said, Stefan's is gone. I don't know where they are, and I'm very afraid of finding them, or they will find me. Many years from now, when I've aged again and the price seems low, I gave a molar. He's gone. Forever. What would you give for longer? The price will be higher, much higher next time. I'm seeing things, but I don't think it's my paranoia. The installation, this place that swallowed the horizon and crushed the sky, was always alive. I realize that now. Every beat of its metallic heart, every whisper in its corroded corridors was the pulse of a creature older and more malevolent than I could imagine. But I didn't understand that when I arrived. Back then, I was still clinging to the remnants of my old life, to the memory of my best friend and the life we had shared. A life that now seemed as distant as a dream, slipping further away every day. When Mr. Green made his offer, it felt like a lifeline. Double the salary, risk bonus, a chance to escape the sadness that had consumed me since from my friend. But beneath the surface, I knew there was something darker. Green didn't care about my qualifications. He saw someone with no ties, no reason to say no. Deep down, I knew this too. My friend's voice echoed in my mind, warning me against taking the job. "Think about it," he reportedly said. "You don't need this." But I was desperate to escape the memories, the guilt that gnawed at me. I convinced myself it was just work, just numbers. But even then, I think I knew I wasn't running away from my sadness. I was running toward it. The helicopter ride to the facility was unnerving. We flew over an ocean that seemed infinite, a cold, steel-gray expanse that mirrored the sky. Inside the helicopter, the air is thick with tension, and a metallic taste sticks to the back of my throat. The other passengers were silent, their faces pale and tense. We were told not to speak. A command that seemed less like an instruction is more like a warning. One of the men in front of me broke the silence, asking if it was my first time on the high seas. Before I could respond, the pilot turned slightly, and in the reflection of his visor, I saw eyes as empty and cold as the sea below us. My colleague fell silent, shrinking into his seat as if trying to disappear. I wanted to speak, to ask what he knew, but something held me back. A primal instinct that told me it was better to keep quiet. When the helicopter finally descended, the facility emerged from the mist like a beast rising from the depths. It was huge, rusty, and covered in jagged edges that looked ready to tear apart the sky. When I stepped onto the platform, the ground shook beneath my feet, as if the facility itself was waking up, sensing my presence. Harris was waiting for me. He was older than I expected, his face marked by age and something else. Resignation, perhaps, or exhaustion. He didn't waste time with introductions, just nodded and led me inside. "Keep your head down and you'll be fine," he said, his voice monotone. "And remember, whatever you see, whatever you hear, it stays here." His words hung in the air long after he left me alone in the cold, sterile hallways. I knew then that this place was different, that it wasn't just an oil rig. The walls seemed to close in around me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The first few days were a blur of spreadsheets and reports, but the discomfort I felt only grew stronger. The installation was alive. Its heartbeat was a constant hum in the walls, a rhythm I found myself unconsciously following. The numbers that once held me down now felt like a code I couldn't decipher, a puzzle with missing pieces. They appeared in strange places, engraved on walls, scrawled in the dirt, even haunting my dreams. At night I dreamed about my friend. His face became more indistinct with each passing day, his features blurring until he was just a shadow in my mind. In those dreams, we were back in our hometown, building a model airplane together in his garage. But every time something was different, a detail wrong, a piece out of place. Sometimes the plane was covered in rust, other times he had unknown numbers. The dream repeated itself night after night, warping as it went on. His laughter turned to screams, the model plane's wings dripping with oil, its fuselage opening to reveal a gaping, rusty maw. When I woke up, the taste of salt and rust remained in my mouth, and the room seemed to close in around me. Numbers, once a source of order, began to mock me with their relentless presence. They were a constant reminder that I was losing myself, that the facility was stripping away my identity piece by piece. Harris noticed the change in me before I did. He began to reach out to me more frequently, although our conversations were still brief and cryptic. One day I confronted him, desperate for answers. "What is this place, Harris? Why does it look like it's alive?" He looked at me for a long moment before responding, his voice heavy with something I couldn't identify. "This facility, it has a mind of its own. It's been here longer than any of us, and it will be here long after we're gone. You need to understand that it's not just metal and machinery, it's something more." "But what does he want?" he insists. He shook his head, the lines on his face deepening. "He doesn't want to. He simply is. And he takes what he needs." There was something in his tone that unnerved me, something that suggested a deeper understanding of the true nature of the installation. I wanted to ask more, to press him for details, but the look in his eyes stopped me. There was a resignation there, a sense that he had made peace with whatever the facility demanded of him. And as much as I wanted answers, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear them. The other crew members avoided me. They moved through the halls like ghosts, their eyes blank, their faces expressionless. They were an odd group, silent, distant, as if they had already surrendered to the facility's will. I tried to talk to them, ask questions, but they just looked at me with those eyes before turning around, their mouths moving in silent, mechanical chants. The divers first appeared in my peripheral vision, shadows moving across the lower levels of the facility. They were unsettling, figures dressed in wetsuits, their faces hidden behind reflective visors. They moved with a grace that seemed impossible for beings so heavily encased in metal, gliding through the dark corridors like ghosts. I watched them from the shadows, my heart pounding in my... Something deep inside me warned me to stay away, but I couldn't look away. They disappeared into the lower decks where the light barely reached, and the air was heavy with the smell of rust and decay. I turned to leave, but found Harris standing a few feet away, his eyes cold and knowing. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice as sharp as the rusted edges of the facility. I was just... "Go back to your quarters," he replied. "Now." I fled, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallways, muffled by the whispers that seemed to follow me wherever I went. But I couldn't stop thinking about the divers. The more I tried to push them out of my mind, the more they consumed my thoughts. I scoured the facility for answers, searching the old records and reports, but the information I found was fragmentary at best. They were mentioned in passing, never explained, just shadows in the records, as well as in the hallways. Then, while searching through a forgotten storage room, I found an old diary hidden behind a loose panel. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded, but the words were clear enough to read. The diary belonged to a former worker, someone who had been at the facility long before me. The entries were erratic, full of paranoid ramblings about the divers. The writer described how the divers were not human, not anymore. They had been claimed by the facility, their bodies and minds distorted by the pit's influence. They were guardians, enforcers, ensuring the crew followed the rules, that no one got out of line. One passage stood out, sending shivers down my spine. They were once like us, but the facility took them. She takes us all in the end. I see it now. I see what they are. Their faces, their hands, I recognize them. Friends, colleagues, swallowed by this place, by the well. They are watching me. I see them in my dreams. I hear them whispering in the walls, calling me to join them. It's just a matter of time. I realized then that I was too afraid to admit it. The facility had claimed my friend, just as it was claiming me. The man who had once been my closest companion was now one of them. A duty, a hollow shell of the person he once was, swallowed whole by this place. Of the team became more frequent, more elaborate. They gathered in the depths of the facility, performing synchronized movements that were almost mechanical, their voices a monotone chant in a language I couldn't understand. They traced symbols in the air, symbols I began to see in my dreams, glowing dimly in the darkness. They weren't just for show, they were necessary. Without them, the installation would consume us all. At first, I refused to join them, clinging to the belief that I could maintain my individuality, my sanity. But the pressure became unbearable. The facility itself seemed to close in around me, its walls pulsing with a life of its own. I felt in my bones, in my mind, the overwhelming force that demanded my submission. My thoughts fragmented, my memories of the outside world faded, replaced by the relentless hum of the facility. I joined the team, carrying out the with them, imitating their movements, their songs. At first it felt wrong, a betrayal of who I was, but over time, I found myself trusting those to keep the darkness at bay. The influence of the installation penetrated me, and I began to understand the symbols, the chants. The numbers that once haunted me became a guide, their patterns revealing the will of the installation. As I delved deeper into the rhythms of I noticed changes in the crew. Their skin became pale, almost translucent, their eyes dull and lifeless. Their movements became more synchronized, more precise, as if they were no longer individual people but extensions of the installation. They were stripping them of their humanity, and I knew it was happening to me too. But the were never enough. The well still called to me, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. I heard my friend's voice in the whispers of the well, urging me closer, telling me that the answers I sought were inside. I could no longer resist his attraction. Driven by a force I couldn't explain, I descended to the lower levels of the facility where the air was thick with the stench of rust and oil. The walls were slippery and the floors uneven, light barely penetrating the oppressive darkness. The pounding on the walls had become a deafening roar, echoing in my mind, synchronized with the frantic beat of my heart. The well was there, at the center of it all, a vast yawning abyss that seemed to go on forever. It wasn't just a hole in the ground, it was a living thing, a mouth ready to swallow me whole. I felt its pull in my bones, in my very soul, pulling me closer, erasing the last remnants of my will. As I stood at the edge of the well, teetering on the edge, I saw movement in the darkness. A figure appeared, dressed in familiar diving gear, his visor reflecting the dim light. A diver. But I knew deep down that I wasn't just any diver, it was him. The diver reached out his hand and I noticed something, a small scar on his wrist just visible through the torn glove. It was a scar I had seen 1,000 times, a memory of an accident, a mark my friend had carried with him ever since. My heart froze as the truth set in. A truth I had been running from since the moment I arrived. My friend didn't have. He had been taken, consumed by the facility, transformed into this hollow mechanical shell. I should have been horrified, but instead I felt an overwhelming sense of calm. That was it. This is what I was moving towards all along. The installation has always been a part of me, just as it was a part of him. My resistance crumbled and I reached out, taking his hand in mine. In that moment, I felt the installation surge through me, its cold mechanical heart merging with mine. The whispers from the well filled my mind, drowning out every thought, every memory. I wasn't myself anymore. I was part of something bigger, something ancient, something that existed long before I was born and would continue long after I was gone. The diver let go of my hand and retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the darkness, but I didn't follow him. I turned away from the well and faced the facility, my new home. The rusty walls pulsed with life. The numbers glowed dimly in the dim light. I was at home. Harris found me the next day, standing at the edge of the well, looking into the abyss. He didn't say anything, just nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. I didn't need words. I understood now. The facility had claimed another, and the cycle continued. I entered us of the crew without hesitation, my movements fluid, my voice steady. The numbers that once tormented me now guided me, their patterns clear and unyielding. The rust that spread throughout the facility was no longer a sign of decay, but of life, a sign of the facility's power. But something was different now, something deeper. As I moved through the hallways, I began to feel the installation not just as a presence, but as an extension of myself. The walls breathed with me, the metal vibrated with my heartbeat. I could feel the rust crawling under my skin, fusing with my veins, transforming my in cold and metallic wires. I was becoming part of the installation in a way I had not imagined, in a way that transcended mere physical transformation. I started to see the world through the eyes of the installation. The horizon wasn't just a line, it was a border, a limit that the facility had to push, expand beyond. The sea was not just water, it was a source of life, a source of energy that feeds the hunger at the end of the installation. And the team, the people who were once my colleagues, were no longer individuals. They were cells in a larger organism, each playing a role, each vital to the survival of the facility. When new workers arrived, I greeted them with the same calm detachment that Harris showed me. I saw the fear in their eyes, the confusion, and I knew it wouldn't be long before they understood the truth. I had become what I once feared, a man who had surrendered to the facility, who had become part of something much bigger than himself. But there was no fear in this realization, only acceptance. Because once the facility decides, there is no escape. She will find you, and she will take you, just as she took so many before. As I sit in my quarters, the tapping on the walls synchronized with the beat of my heart, I realize that the installation has consumed me, body and soul. The man I was, an accountant who sought order and control, was gone, replaced by something else, something that understands the rhythms of this place, the hunger that moves it. And when my time comes, I won't resist. I will go willingly, just as those before me did, because that's the way things are. But now I understand what that means on a level I didn't before. The facility is not just a machine, it is not just a predator, it is a force, a presence that transcends the physical, something that exists outside of time and space. It is a part of the fabric of the universe, a manifestation of the infinite cycle of and destruction. To become part of the installation is to lose yourself completely, to surrender every trace of individuality, every memory, every thought. It is to become a vessel for something ancient and unknowable, something that has existed since the beginning of time and will continue long after the stars have gone out. It is to be consumed, body and soul, by the hunger that moves the universe itself. And in that realization, there is a strange comfort, because by surrendering to the installation, I am no longer alone. I am no longer just a man, isolated and afraid. I'm part of something bigger, something will never disappear. And when the installation finally takes me, when the rust has spread to every part of my being, I will become one with it. I will become the walls, the floors, the hum of the heartbeat. I will become the numbers etched into the metal, the symbols drawn in the air. I will become the installation itself, and in that, I will find peace, because that's the way things are.